This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're very fortunate to have as our guest one of the leading political leaders in the state of Alabama, the very popular and outstanding Secretary of State of Alabama, John Merrill. Son, good to have you.
Good to see you, my friend.
John Merrill, y'all, is the hardest working political figure in the state. Matter of fact, he is, I'm not saying philosophically, but he reminds me of two of the greatest political figures in past Alabama political history, and that's George Wallace and Don Siegelman. They were retail politicians that knew the state. He knows almost everybody in the Republican Party and throughout the state one-on-one. He does television, social media, but he knows everybody in the state the old-fashioned way. Put shoe leather and wore out some tires, didn't you, John?
No doubt, my friend. I don't think there's a better way to stay in touch with our people than by visiting with them, and you know that's one of the things I really enjoy doing. They
know you. From every 67 counties, you've got an organization in every one of them. John has been Secretary of State, has been Secretary of State for 6 years now, and he is going to be running for the U.S. Senate in the March primary. The primary is right around the corner, y'all. March 3rd is the Republican primary for the United States Senate for the Jeff Sessions Senate seat for a full 6-year term. John Merrill was born and raised in Cleveland County. His daddy was probate judge there. Now, if y'all don't know where that is, that's right on the Georgia line between Anniston and Atlanta. If you head in Atlanta, Cleveland County is Heflin, Alabama. And his daddy was probate judge there. I recently had the opportunity to meet his mama at his announcement for the U.S. Senate, and I've known his sister for years. She's a school teacher here in Montgomery, I believe.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And they were at John's kickoff for the United States Senate at the Capitol on a hot day, June day, I might add. But his daddy, I'd never forget this story. John knows everybody in the state because he got roots in Cleveland. His dad's probate judge, so he knows every rural box. I don't know if it was John's first race for Secretary of State or the second one or whatever, but his daddy called him and said, one rural box there, you got every one of the votes. Which one was that, John?
That was up in Edwardsville.
What was the number? Do you remember?
It was like 98-0. And, and my daddy, when he called me and told me, Steve, he said, we're going to move to Edwardsville. He was so excited.
He loved that. Your mom was such a sweet lady, and then but your daddy grew up in, and actually we've talked about in the past, you had an uncle or some relatives on the Supreme Court, Pelham, Merrill.
Yes. My papa's first cousin, Pelham Merrill, served on the Alabama Supreme Court for 24 years and was the senior justice when Senator Heflin was in his term as the chief for our state between 1971 and 1977. John
Merrill ran for Secretary of State. First time would have been 2010.
14.
Right. 14, and then he would serve one term in the legislature. But back to his growing up in Cleveland County, he went on to the University of Alabama and was president of the Student Government Association in Alabama. A lot of great political leaders have had that path, and then he settled in there in Tuscaloosa and worked for the banks and school system and everything there, and he really is from Tuscaloosa. That's his home, and he and Cindy vote there and live there and have raised their children there.
That's correct. We've been there for 37 years. Of course, we went there as freshmen back in 1982.
Were y'all freshmen together?
And at the same time, we started at the university.
Did you know her then?
We met at church at Calvary Baptist.
Y'all still go to Calvary?
That's right, and that's where we were married, was at Calvary Baptist. That's where both of our children were saved, and of course they grew up there, and they both went to Hillcrest High School in Tuscaloosa, and now they're living in other parts of the country.
How old are they now, John?
Well, our son is 29, and our daughter is 26, and he has been living in a lot of different locations because of his work. They've moved him several different places, and our daughter, she lives in Queens, New York, so she's an international flight attendant.
Well, I know you're proud of them. And they grew up there in Tuscaloosa, and then you serve a term in the legislature. You and I first met when I was in the legislature.
Yes, sir, that's
Remember,
correct.
you used to come down here for some political reason. You always loved politics, and we got to know each other then and stayed good friends over the years. But you went to the legislature in 2010.
Yes, sir.
You know, you made a lot of good friends there. I realized that when the Chairman of the Rules Committee from Andalusia, Mike Jones,
Right.
made your announcement speech with you. That was a very telling thing. He says you had known all your freshman classmates in the legislature, and then you ran for Secretary of State. Tell me something about your first race for Secretary of State. Did you meet a lot of that? Did you do a lot of your legwork then?
You know I did. You know I did, Steve, because it's so important to make sure that you get out and meet folks. And so we started campaigning back in the fall of 2012 and started making the runs.
You came on the show here.
I did, and I put 181,351 miles on my car and 4 sets of tires driving to all 67 counties. And over that 2-year period, I visited all 67 counties at least 2 times. So in 2019, that was the 7th year in a row that I had been to all 67 counties and the 8th time. And no other candidate, as you know, has done that or even come close to it. The only other elected official in our state that does that is Senator Shelby. And you'll love this because I saw Senator Shelby at the Birmingham airport one day, and we were visiting, as he'll do whenever he's there and folks want to talk to him. And he called me over, and we were talking a little bit. And I told him, I said, now, Senator, I said, you know, this is the 7th year in a row and the 8th time I've been to all 67 counties. And we talked for about 10 more minutes, and he came back. How long did you tell me you've been doing that? And I said, this is the 7th year in a row and the 8th time overall. And he said, when you've done it 33 times, let me know.
He has. Do you know he's still doing it?
Oh, yes, he does.
I had dinner with him the other night, and he was, I said, share what you doing the rest of the week. This was on Thursday night. We were having dinner in Birmingham, and he says, he and Dane Cutler, his chief of staff, were going to Scottsboro, Fort Payne, and Cullman the next day. Here's an 85-year-old guy with 33 years in the United States Senate, chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, probably not going to run for re-election. I wish he would. Everybody in the state does, but you know. But you'd be a good counterpart with old Shelby. You know, he's very high and on seniority. He realizes how important seniority is. And as we mentioned in the prelude to the show, you are running for the United States Senate. Now, the perceived front runners in that race are you, Bradley Byrne, who is a congressman from Mobile, who's been run for governor once before in 2010, and of course Chief Justice Roy Moore, former Roy Moore. But given those makeups, you know, this may seem like a small thing to some people, but you're sitting here at 54, Burns 64, and Moore 75.
Right.
Now, the average voter doesn't really pay attention to age much, but that 10-year age difference and 20-year age difference and who goes to represent us in that Senate makes a difference.
Steve, it can make a lot of difference in seniority when it comes to length of service in the body. And the longer you stay, the more effective you can become if you are doing things the way that they're supposed to be done. And of course, with Senator Shelby is a great example and the premier federal official in the history of the state of Alabama. You can rest assured I've been taking notes from him for a long, long time.
He is the best, and it's mind-boggling, John, how much money he is bringing to the state now. He talks in such big figures. For example, we were talking that night, and one of the things they sold on the Rebuild Alabama program that passed this last year in the legislature on raising the gasoline tax for infrastructure improvement in the state was the state docks being expanded. Earlier, a year earlier, he and I were having dinner almost at the same location, the same restaurant, and he revealed something to me at that time that just shocked me. He said, I'm going to make it a priority to widen and deepen the port in Mobile. He says, do you know that our Mercedes vehicles that are made in Alabama and the other manufacturers cannot ship through that port now?
It's really an embarrassment, Steve, when they have to go to another port, whether it be in Jacksonville or whether it be in Georgia. It's a problem for us, and it's just a problem emotionally that the vehicles that we create as the second largest domestic automotive manufacturer in the United States cannot be shipped out of our own state to go other parts of the world. And so Senator Shelby, of course, took the lead on that, as he does most issues, and has corrected that problem.
He really had. He was talking about how much money he's going to raise from Mobile for that dock. He said something like $50 million is what he's going to get them, and that's more than the state's going to get.
No doubt.
I mean, so he's going to do his part more than that. But you'd have an opportunity to work with him for several years.
Yes, sir.
You might could convince him to stay.
Well, one of the things I shared with him when I told him that I was seriously considering this candidacy was I said, Senator, you need to know whether I have the privilege to serve with you for 2 years plus in the Senate, or whether I have the privilege to serve with you for 22 years in the Senate. No matter how long I'm there with you, and no matter when you choose to go, I'll always be the junior senator from Tuscaloosa.
That's exactly right. You know, one thing that was just so stark to me, Senator Shelby was gracious enough to invite me to go to the State of the Union with him a year or two ago, and his wife Annette was not going to be able to make it, so I sat with where she would sit, and we had a good visit. And I looked over there. It was so strange that every Southern senator was sitting around Shelby, on the Republican side, on the right side of the Senate, and sitting right across the aisle was our junior U.S. Senator, Doug Jones, sitting right next to Chuck Schumer and some other liberal from New York, from New Jersey or something.
Right.
And he was the only Southern senator over there on that side.
Well, and it's an embarrassment, Steve. As I have mentioned before, and you've heard me and you've reported, Doug Jones does not represent our people. He does not represent our state. And he would be better served representing California, New York, or Illinois, or some other liberal state.
He'd be more at home there. And I halfway think, John, he knows that he cannot win that seat as a Democrat. I think whoever wins y'all's primary, the Republican primary, on March 3rd will win the Senate seat. With one caveat, I think that, as all of us know, if Judge Moore were to be the nominee for some reason, he has such an albatross and be so much national money pumped in here. And that's one reason why Jones was able to survive that thing anyway.
Correct. It
was $20 million of left-wing liberal California, Village, New York, California, San Francisco money pumped in here.
Right.
That's the only show in town. Anyway, I get off my subject, but that seat is a Republican seat.
No doubt about it.
And you've been a hardcore, staunch Republican, and but I really do salute the fact that you're a retail politician. I mean, you use the word retail political leader. I marvel, and I tell people this all the time. I enjoy talking to Senator Shelby and other people about your exploits. I say, Shelby, you know, some of them may go to a barbecue in Mobile or something, but on 4th of July, Labor Day, Merrill, give me an example of your Labor Day or you start up around 4th of July, you started in the Tennessee Valley and you wind up in, now 4th of July, all of y'all go to that American Village.
Yes.
But give me your last Labor Day if you can remember.
I'll tell you, well, on the 4th, it's easier because it was not long ago, of course, but we were able to go from DeKalb County, where we had a major event. We had actually 3 activities up there on that day. We went to a breakfast, we went to a parade, and we went to a dedication flagpole there in Henniger up in DeKalb County.
Let me stop you. I know it don't get you off your train of thought, but I realized after you had told me you're going to Henniger, I thought, what in the world are you doing in Henniger? But all those legislators up there was a big thing up there.
That's right.
I got an invitation from Steve Livingston, the senator up there, after I talked with you. But
yes, sir.
You started in Henniger. There was a parade up there.
And then we left there, and of course we moved on down the state. We went to Coleman. After we left to Coleman.
What was the event in Coleman? What kind of event was it?
You know, I can't even remember today exactly what it was, but I will tell you that we went from there down to Shelby County to a big luncheon that they had. Mr. Archie Phillips, who you remember had the first outdoor show, they had more than 125 people that come to the luncheon that they do every 4th of July. And of course, I was able to speak to them, and that was a great thrill for me. We left there, went over to the American Village, stayed there until about 4 o'clock, left there and went over to Anniston, and then down to Oxford Lake, where they have one of the biggest fireworks show in the state every year. And we stayed there, spoke to at least 1,000 people.
In Calhoun County?
Yes, sir, right there. As they gather around the lake, and I just went from person to person to person until it got dark. And when it got dark and the music started, and then they were about to start the fireworks, it was time to go.
You know, John, I thought I'd use this illustration in my book, and you know the saying, the old friends and neighbors politics.
Oh, yes, sir.
Alabamians will vote for somebody from their neck of the woods. You're going to carry Calhoun County because they figure you're from there.
Yes, sir.
Because you can spend a lot of time there, too.
Yes, sir.
But I mean, a lot of other counties, too. But you got 2 home bases. That's why Big Jim Folsom won the 1946 governor's race, is because he was born and raised in Elba in the Wiregrass, but then moved to Coleman, so he had Coleman and the Wiregrass.
Yes,
he
sir.
could claim home areas. You can legitimately claim Cleburne and Tuscaloosa in different parts of the state.
Yes, sir. And you know, some have even said we can claim Franklin too up in northwest
because
Alabama
that's
because
right.
of Cindy, because we spend so much time up there, and that's just been tremendous in being able to have those territories claimed as our own, because we invest so much time and energy and resources in each one of those areas.
Do you know that Franklin County connection will extend to the Quad Cities and also
Yes, sir.
down into some really popular areas, Marion and all those counties through there?
Well, you know, my treasurer for my campaign's from Winfield. He's my CPA, and he's been there with us forever since he got his accounting degree at the University of Alabama. We were his first client when he moved home to start practicing up there. And of course, you know, Winfield has a great history in Alabama politics too, you know, with our friend Rankin Fight. And,
oh, yeah.
that entire area up there.
Did you enjoy our stories on Rankin?
Oh, that was great. Yes, sir.
Had you heard that before?
I was tremendous.
Hey, John, I love that Marion County Journal record. If you think about it, Les Walters does a good job up there. He did a heck of a job with you recently. Had you all over my editorial page. But anyway, back to last Labor Day, when I was back in my 20s and 30s, a must-go event, and I have to say the one who made it every year was Senator Heflin, was a Terry Fan reunion up in Lawrence County,
yes,
around Moulton, right below the Quad Cities.
That's right.
And you're the only one that still goes to that thing, but that's still an important event.
There's still a lot of people that go there, Steve, and they like to see elected officials
They
or
do.
those that are running for
Well, they
public
grew up
office
used
come
to
in.
it.
Yes, sir.
I went there one year, and Beasley was there, Baxley was there. They were all running for governor. They flew in helicopters.
Yes, sir.
That was a must-go event, was a Terry Fan reunion on Labor Day.
Right.
Everybody running. George Wallace made it. The 2 events that were must-go events, they probably don't have this anymore, the first Monday Trade Day in Scottsboro. That's probably gone. But they still have the Terry Fan reunion.
Yes, they do. And
John, that county, everybody, they show enough really kin to each other.
yes, sir.
Up there.
Yes, sir. And my preacher in Calvary Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa is married to one of those Terrys.
Do you know they would have the worst habit, though? I served 5 terms in the House, and they would change their representative every term. They might swap it out. One of them have big fights and run against each other and beat each other. Be a new one come down every 4 years because they could never build in seniority. And I ask every one of them, I'd say, are you kin to the Terry? Yes, sir, Mr.
yes.
Flowers. My mom was a Terry. And I go to the Church of Christ, too.
Of course they do.
You know, so every one of those guys that came from down there was a Terry. So you almost got to be. I mean, people in the rest of the country make fun of us in the South being kin there, but we really are in that
That's
county.
right. That's right. And that's not always a bad thing either.
No. Tell me about you are going to spend a lot of time in the areas where the big Republican votes are, like Talga and Elmore and Montgomery here, and Baldwin, Mobile, and Shelby, of course, and
Yes, sir.
Birmingham. But I tell you what's really growing is Huntsville.
Oh, it is.
I think you realize that.
Yes, sir.
You spend time up there, don't you?
Yes, sir. When I was running for Secretary of State the very first time, I made 53 trips up there over an 18-month period of time. Nobody made more than me. And Tommy Battle often jokes that I must be paying property taxes up there because I'm up there so frequently. He knows I must have a place that I live in while I'm there.
It's very popular. I mean, I think everybody knows it's growing, but when the census is taken next year, I swear that it's going to be mind-boggling. And the thing that's so mind-boggling about it, John, is the doggone jobs they're creating up there are all six-figure jobs.
Oh, yes, sir.
In the aerospace industry and all that sort of thing. I mean, you know, it's amazing. And Senator Shelby's aware of that, too. He's done a lot for Huntsville.
He's done a lot to make Huntsville be Huntsville.
It is.
Today.
It really is.
You know, I think it's important to remember, too, Steve, when you're talking about how Huntsville became Huntsville, a lot of the young people or folks that might be pushing back and saying there's too much governmental investment in Huntsville, they don't realize Huntsville's Huntsville because of John Sparkman.
Exactly.
I mean, John Sparkman made sure that that investment was made there, and of course, nobody's ever done a better job of ensuring that it continues to be what it should be than Senator Shelby has during his service in the Senate.
Having said that, the logical thing, if you look at the state and you are elected, you've got to go on armed services. What committee would would be the best to try to, when we lose Shelby?
Well, there's,
I don't think you can get on appropriations,
sure.
can you?
You know, Steve, there's 3 committees that I would love to serve on. First and foremost, I don't care what committee they put me on, I want to be on agriculture.
Okay.
Because agriculture is so very important to our state and to the people in our state. It's still the #1 industry in our state. And I think it's important to show the commitment to the farmers by serving in that role and making sure that we're continuing to open doors for them and to give them the support that they need to be successful. Number 2.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Oh, yes, sir.
People don't, unless you're as good a political leader as you are, don't realize that they're still our #1 industry, and a lot of our senators have ignored that committee. And I'm not trying to throw stones at Jeff Sessions, but judiciary doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, foreign affairs doesn't do anybody any good.
No, sir.
I hate to say that, but I mean, they're all
And I will
prestigious.
tell you, as an example, if I were placed on foreign relations, what I would want to do is to use that to help expand our markets for our agriculture industry. Because we are in a position to do that as we try to make sure that our products are sent around the world. And to make sure that the trade agreements that we enter into are agreements that benefit our #1 industry, agriculture.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. That is so important for this state. And that's brilliant. And only someone that knows Alabama knows that too. Go ahead with the second.
And of course, third, if I were on those 2, since you mentioned foreign relations as the second one, would be without, not in this particular order, but defense and being on armed services.
Yeah.
Because being on armed forces, on armed services committee, you can help not only Huntsville and all of that area up there in Jackson, Madison, and Limestone, Morgan, and Marshall counties with the investment that takes place there in the Tennessee Valley, but also down in the Wiregrass, where the forts are still so prolific, just like when we used to have Fort McClellan up in the Anniston area. But in being able to bring those type investments there and to make sure that our armed forces are still getting the respect that they deserve and the investment that's necessary to keep us where we need to be, we want to continue to move Alabama forward in that regard.
You're so right. And in that conversation I had recently with Senator Shelby, it's something like $27 million of new appropriations he's bringing to Rucker and the Wiregrass. But on top of that, you mentioned Huntsville, you mentioned the Wiregrass, but right here where we're sitting in Montgomery, the #1 employer in Montgomery River region is Maxwell Gunner.
Yes, sir.
It's
yes,
#1.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that. Todd Strange was sitting on this show one day, and I was talking to him about his city. And he says, I said, the state economy has hurt you because the state was down here. He said, that's not our biggest employer. Our biggest employer is Maxwell Gunner.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not going to try to give him all the credit because it's not the Richard Shelby show, but that F-35 had a lot to do with Shelby.
But you know, it's just like him to share the praise because he continued to talk about how Representative Roby had done a good job in making that happen when we all know The reason it happened is because of Shelby, and Shelby making it happen. Because Shelby can make it rain.
He can. He sure can.
Yes, sir.
But that Rucker Maxwell gunner is going to need protecting. And I don't think it's going to be in problem with Bragg, but it's important to this city's economy.
Yes, sir.
Without question. If anybody goes to the Senate from Alabama, they need to think defense first.
Yes, sir.
Or agriculture is those two.
Well, it's a combination.
You take those two out,
Yes,
you're in
sir.
trouble.
Yes, sir.
But I think you're on the right path on those things. Is Cindy enjoying getting out campaign?
Yes, sir.
She likes
She
it,
has.
doesn't she?
She's really enjoyed it, much more so than the other offices that we've attempted to attain and have been successful in our campaigns. She had not had the enthusiasm for the State House or the enthusiasm for Secretary of State that she's exhibited for the U.S. Senate run.
Well, she seemed real happy at the announcement. I thought I was watching her. She seemed like she's real contented with being involved in politics. It's so difficult for wives to be out there, and she seemed to enjoy it. But y'all at a good time in life. You're the right age to get up there, but your children are grown, so y'all can spend time together, and she can travel with you and be involved in the campaign. But,
Yes, sir.
I think you're going to do well in the Senate race, and I wish you well. And the state could do a lot worse than having John Merrill in the United States Senate.
Thank you for that.
I tell you one thing, y'all. When the votes are counted on March 3rd, don't be surprised this guy's not leading the top of the ticket. It'll definitely be a runoff. It'll be a great race for the United States Senate come March, which is right around the corner, and one of the leading candidates is sitting right here with you. Secretary of State John Merrill, who is, of course, running for the United States Senate. We thank him for being our guest, and we thank you viewers for watching. We hope you tune again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Yes, sir, my friend. Thank you.